What if everything you believe about time is wrong? What if the past, present, and future don't flow like a river, but exist simultaneously in ways that would fundamentally change how we understand reality, consciousness, and our place in the cosmos? Tonight, we're going to explore one of the most profound questions in modern physics and philosophy. A question that challenges the very foundation of human experience and could revolutionize our understanding of existence itself. From the moment we're born, we experience time as an unstoppable current carrying us from past to future. We remember yesterday, we plan for tomorrow, and we live in what we call now. This seems so obvious, so fundamental that questioning it feels absurd. But what if this intuitive understanding is completely backwards? What if time doesn't flow at all? This isn't science fiction or idle speculation. This is a possibility that emerges from our most advanced understanding of physics, supported by experimental evidence and embraced by leading theoretical physicists around the world. It's an idea so radical that it forces us to reconsider everything we think we know about existence, free will, and the nature of consciousness itself. To understand why some of the greatest minds in physics have arrived at such extraordinary conclusions, we need to begin with the story of how our understanding of time was revolutionized in the 20th century, and how that revolution continues to challenge our most basic assumptions about reality. Every human culture that has ever existed has developed concepts around the flow of time. We speak in past, present, and future tense. Our emotions are temporal. We feel regret about the past, anxiety about the future, and presence in the now. Our entire concept of causality depends on this linear flow of time, with causes preceding effects, actions preceding consequences, and decisions preceding outcomes. Even our brains appear hardwired for this temporal experience. Neuroscientists have identified neural networks dedicated to processing time, regions that create our sense of duration, sequence, and temporal order. We have internal biological clocks that regulate everything from sleep cycles to hormone production, all synchronized to this apparent flow of time. But here's where the story becomes fascinating. This seemingly obvious experience of flowing time might be nothing more than an evolutionary accident. Consider that our brains evolved to navigate a three-dimensional world where survival depended on predicting motion, remembering food sources, and avoiding predators. A brain that could process temporal sequences, remember where the berries grew yesterday, and predict where the predator might be tomorrow had a massive survival advantage. So perhaps our experience of flowing time isn't a window into the true nature of reality. Perhaps it's just a cognitive tool, like our perception of colour or our sense of up and down. We don't assume that the universe is actually painted in the colours we see. We understand that colour is how our brains interpret different wavelengths of electromagnetic radiation. Similarly, what if the flow of time is just how our consciousness interprets something far more complex? Consider this unsettling possibility. Every other intuitive belief humans once held about the nature of reality has been overturned by science. We once believed the Earth was flat and stationary at the center of the universe. We thought matter was continuous rather than made of discrete atoms. We believed that space and time were absolute and unchanging backdrops against which events unfolded. In each case, our direct experience led us astray. The Earth certainly feels flat when you're standing on it. The Sun obviously appears to revolve around us. Matter feels solid and continuous to our touch. So why should we trust our experience of time? Why should this one aspect of reality be exactly as it appears to our evolved primate brains? The possibility that time's flow is illusory becomes even more intriguing when we consider the work of cognitive scientists studying temporal perception. Research has shown that our sense of now isn't actually instantaneous. The brain constructs the present moment from sensory information that arrives at slightly different times and integrates it into what feels like a singular experience of the current moment. Studies of patients with certain types of brain damage reveal how fragile our temporal experience really is. Some individuals lose the ability to sequence events properly, experiencing the world as a jumbled collection of moments without clear temporal order. Others become trapped in eternal presence, unable to form new memories or anticipate future events. These conditions suggest that our normal experience of time's flow depends on specific neural mechanisms that can be disrupted. What if these disrupted states reveal something profound about the nature of time itself? What if the ordered, flowing experience of time that we consider normal is actually the constructed illusion, while these altered states provide glimpses into a more fundamental reality where temporal sequence isn't inherent to existence? This question becomes even more compelling when we examine what modern physics has discovered about the nature of time and space. The revolutionary insights of 20th century physics didn't just change our understanding of the cosmos. They shattered our most basic assumptions about the temporal structure of reality itself. In 1905, a young patent clerk named Albert Einstein published a paper that would forever change our understanding of space, time, and reality itself. His theory of special relativity didn't just introduce new concepts to physics, it demolished assumptions about time that had seemed self-evident for thousands of years. Among Einstein's most startling discoveries was the relativity of simultaneity. This principle reveals something deeply unsettling. There is no universal now. There is no single moment that counts as the present throughout the universe. This seems impossible. Right now, as you process these words, it feels obvious that there's a specific moment that is now everywhere in the cosmos. Surely the entire universe shares this same present moment, this same slice of time. But Einstein demonstrated that this intuition is fundamentally wrong. What counts as now depends on your motion through space. Two events that appear simultaneous to one observer may appear sequential to another observer, moving at a different velocity. The faster you travel through space, the more dramatically your experience of simultaneity differs from that of stationary observers. This isn't just a theoretical curiosity. The relativity of simultaneity has been confirmed by countless experiments, from measurements of particle decay in accelerators to the precise calculations required for GPS satellites to function accurately. The global positioning system must account for relativistic effects to maintain its precision, constantly adjusting for the different rates at which time passes for satellites moving at high velocities relative to Earth. But the implications extend far beyond practical applications. If there's no universal present moment, if simultaneity is relative to the observer, then our everyday concept of time as a flowing river carrying all of reality from past to future breaks down completely. Einstein's insights led to an even more radical realization. Space and time aren't separate entities, but parts of a single unified structure called spacetime. This four-dimensional continuum combines the three dimensions of space with one dimension of time into a single geometric framework. Events in the universe aren't located in space at particular moments in time. They're located at specific coordinates in space-time. This space-time structure has properties that challenge our intuitive understanding of temporal flow. In space-time, the distinction between past, present, and future becomes a matter of perspective rather than objective reality. What we call the passage of time might be more like the way different observers see different aspects of a landscape from their particular vantage points. Consider an analogy that Einstein himself used. Imagine you're viewing a mountain range from a train. As the train moves, different peaks come into view while others disappear behind you. From your perspective, the mountains appear and disappear in sequence, creating a temporal experience of the landscape. but the entire mountain range exists simultaneously. Your sequential experience is created by your motion through space, not by the mountains themselves appearing and disappearing. Similarly, what if our experience of temporal flow is created by consciousness moving through a four-dimensional landscape that exists all at once? What if past, present, and future are like different regions of space-time that consciousness encounters in sequence, even though they all exist simultaneously in the broader structure of reality? This possibility leads to one of the most profound and controversial ideas in modern physics: Eternalism, also known as the block universe theory. According to this view, all moments in time, past, present, and future, exist equally and simultaneously within the four-dimensional structure of space-time. If eternalism is correct, then right now, as you experience this present moment, all other moments in time are equally real and equally existent. The moment of your birth exists. The moment of your death exists. Every joy, every sorrow, every decision, every consequence, all exist simultaneously in the eternal structure of space-time. But this raises profound questions. If all times exist equally, what creates our experience of moving from past to future? Why do we remember the past but not the future? How can we have free will if the future already exists? And perhaps most disturbing of all, what does this mean for consciousness and the nature of existence itself? The block universe theory represents one of the most radical departures from common sense in the history of human thought. Also known as eternalism, this view suggests that past, present, and future are equally real and exist simultaneously in a four-dimensional structure called space-time. To understand this concept, imagine a loaf of bread. When you slice the bread, each slice represents a different location along its length, but all the slices exist simultaneously within the whole loaf. In the block universe, all moments of time are like slices of this four-dimensional loaf of space-time. Each time slice contains the entire spatial universe at a particular moment, and all these slices exist together in the eternal structure of the block. This means that as you experience this present moment, all other moments in history are equally real and equally present. The signing of the Declaration of Independence exists right now in the block universe. The extinction of the dinosaurs exists right now. Your first day of school exists right now. And even more unsettling, your last day of life exists right now, just as real and present as this moment you're currently experiencing. Leading physicists have embraced this view because it emerges naturally from Einstein's equations and is supported by experimental evidence. The relativity of simultaneity, confirmed by decades of precision measurements, demonstrates that there's no universal present moment. If there's no cosmic now that defines the present for all observers, then it makes sense that all moments exist equally in the structure of space-time. Dr. Hermann Minkowski, Einstein's former mathematics professor, expressed this revolutionary insight in 1908.
Henceforth, space by itself, and time by itself, are doomed to fade away into mere shadows, and only a kind of union of the two will preserve an independent reality.
Minkowski wasn't just describing a mathematical formalism. He was revealing that our intuitive separation of space and time is an illusion. Modern experiments continue to support the block universe interpretation. The Huffell-Keating experiment measured time dilation using atomic clocks on airplanes, confirming that time passes at different rates for observers in different reference frames. Particle accelerators routinely observe relativistic effects, where particles moving at high velocities experience time differently than stationary observers. These aren't just technical curiosities, they're glimpses into the fundamental structure of space-time itself. But if the block universe is real, what creates our experience of temporal flow? Why do we feel like we're moving through time if all moments exist simultaneously? The most compelling answer is that consciousness itself creates the illusion of temporal passage by somehow moving through or being localized to specific regions of the block universe. Think of consciousness like a spotlight illuminating different parts of a dark landscape. The entire landscape exists simultaneously, but the spotlight can only illuminate one area at a time. As the spotlight moves, it creates the experience of sequential revelation. First this tree, then that rock, then that distant mountain. The sequential experience is created by the movement of illumination, not by the sequential appearance of the landscape itself. Similarly, consciousness might move through the block universe, experiencing different time slices in sequence and creating the illusion that time is flowing from past to future. The entire four-dimensional structure exists eternally, but consciousness experiences it moment by moment, creating our familiar sense of temporal passage. This interpretation raises profound questions about the nature of consciousness itself. If physical processes, including brain states and neural activity, are all equally real throughout the block universe, what is consciousness that allows it to move through this static structure? How can subjective experience arise from and transcend the fixed geometry of space-time? Some philosophers argue that consciousness must be something beyond the physical structure of the block universe, not necessarily supernatural, but perhaps a fundamental aspect of reality that interacts with but isn't entirely reducible to the space-time geometry. Others suggest that consciousness might be an emergent property that somehow arises from the four-dimensional patterns of information and complexity within the block. The block universe also transforms our understanding of identity and personal existence. If all moments of your life exist simultaneously, what constitutes the you that experiences these moments? Are you the entire four-dimensional object extending through space-time from birth to death, like a complex space-time worm? Or are you the consciousness that experiences individual slices of this four-dimensional being? From the Eternalist perspective, your entire life, every thought, emotion, decision, and experience exists as an eternal pattern in space-time. What we call personal growth and change is actually the structure of this four-dimensional pattern. The you that learns from mistakes isn't changing through time. Rather, the pattern of your world line through the block universe is structured such that later, temporal slices incorporate information from earlier slices. This view has implications for how we understand death and mortality. What we call death might simply be the boundary of our four-dimensional existence, the edge of our pattern in space-time. But the pattern itself, the complete structure of your life from birth to death, exists eternally in the block universe. In some profound sense, you are immortal, not because you survived death, but because your entire existence is timelessly embedded in the eternal structure of reality. Yet this raises disturbing questions about free will and moral responsibility. If your entire life already exists as a fixed pattern in the block universe, do you truly have agency over your choices? Can you be held responsible for actions that are already encoded in the structure of space-time? These questions challenge our most basic assumptions about human agency and moral accountability. While the block universe suggests that all moments exist simultaneously, there's clearly something that creates a sense of direction in time. We never see scrambled eggs spontaneously unscrambling themselves, broken glasses spontaneously reassembling, or puddles of water spontaneously freezing into ice cubes. There's a clear asymmetry between past and future that requires explanation. This directional aspect of time is intimately connected to one of the most fundamental laws in all of physics, the second law of thermodynamics. This law states that in any isolated system, entropy, a measure of disorder or randomness, always increases over time. This principle doesn't just govern the behavior of steam engines and refrigerators, it appears to control the fundamental direction of temporal experience itself. Entropy is often misunderstood as simply messiness, but it's actually a precise measure of the number of possible microscopic arrangements that correspond to a given macroscopic state. A highly ordered system, like a perfect crystal, has relatively few possible arrangements of its atoms. A highly disordered system, like a gas, has vastly more possible arrangements of its particles. The second law tells us that isolated systems naturally evolve from states of low entropy to states of high entropy. This happens because there are simply many more ways for a system to be disordered than ordered. If you randomly rearrange the parts of a system, you're overwhelmingly more likely to end up with a high entropy configuration than a low entropy one. This statistical tendency toward increasing entropy creates what physicists call the thermodynamic arrow of time. The past is the direction of lower entropy. The future is the direction of higher entropy. We remember the past and not the future because memory formation requires the creation of ordered, low entropy records in a higher entropy environment. But here's where the relationship between entropy and the block universe becomes fascinating and complex. If all moments exist simultaneously in the eternal structure of space-time, in what sense is entropy increasing? How can we have a thermodynamic arrow of time in a timeless block universe? One possibility is that entropy isn't really increasing at all. Instead, the block universe might be structured with a built-in entropy gradient, ranging from low entropy at one end, corresponding to what we call the past, to high entropy at the other end, corresponding to what we call the future. Our experience of entropy increasing over time would then be consciousness moving along this predetermined entropy gradient. This interpretation suggests that the second law of thermodynamics isn't describing an ongoing process of entropy increase. Instead, it's describing the fixed structure of the block universe, which happens to be organized with an entropy gradient built into its four-dimensional geometry. What we call the arrow of time is actually the direction along which the entropy gradient points in this eternal structure. From this perspective, the early universe's remarkably low entropy state, often called the past hypothesis, wasn't a coincidence or the result of special initial conditions. It's simply how the block universe is structured. The Big Bang represents the low entropy end of the four-dimensional space-time block, while the eventual heat death of the universe represents the high entropy end. Current cosmological observations support the idea that our universe is heading towards such a high entropy final state. The expansion of space is accelerating due to dark energy, driving galaxies apart and preventing the gravitational collapse that might have led to a different cosmic fate. Instead, we appear destined for a big freeze, a state of maximum entropy where all usable energy has been dissipated and no work can be done. In this final state, all stars will have burned out, all black holes will have evaporated through Hawking radiation, and all energy will be distributed uniformly throughout space at the lowest possible temperature. No structures can form, no processes can occur, no information can be transmitted. The universe becomes a vast, cold, empty, unchanging expanse. But if the block universe is real, this cosmic heat death isn't awaiting us in some distant future. It already exists as part of the four-dimensional structure of space-time. The final moment of maximum entropy, the ultimate end state of our universe, is already encoded in the eternal cosmic structure. This raises profound questions about the relationship between thermodynamics and consciousness. If consciousness creates our experience of temporal flow by moving through the block universe, what happens when it reaches the maximum entropy state? Does consciousness simply cease when it encounters the heat death? Does it somehow reset and begin again? Or does it transcend the apparent boundaries of the physical universe? Some theories suggest that consciousness itself might be related to the entropy gradient. perhaps consciousness naturally flows along regions of decreasing entropy, creating ordered memories and coherent experiences. This could explain why we remember the past, lower entropy, but not the future, higher entropy, and why consciousness seems to flow in the direction of increasing entropy. Others propose that consciousness might be what creates the entropy gradient in the first place. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, it might organize the block universe into its low entropy to high entropy structure, creating the thermodynamic arrow of time that makes coherent experience possible. These ideas remain highly speculative, at the boundary between physics and philosophy, but they illustrate how the combination of the block universe theory with thermodynamics leads to profound questions about the nature of time, consciousness, and cosmic evolution. The strange world of quantum mechanics adds another layer of complexity to our understanding of time and reality. While Einstein's relativity gave us the block universe, quantum mechanics suggests that reality might be far more bizarre than even a four-dimensional eternal structure containing all moments simultaneously. At the quantum scale, particles don't have definite positions or velocities until they're observed. Instead, they exist in superpositions of multiple possible states. The famous double-slit experiment demonstrates this quantum weirdness. A single particle can apparently pass through two slits simultaneously, creating an interference pattern that only makes sense if the particle took both paths at once. But when we try to determine which slit the particle actually passed through, the superposition collapses and the particle is found to have taken only one definite path. The act of observation seems to transform multiple simultaneous possibilities into a single definite reality. This raises profound questions about the nature of reality and time. If particles exist in superpositions of multiple states until observed, what does this mean for the block universe? Does the eternal four-dimensional structure contain all possible quantum states simultaneously? Or do quantum observations somehow select which version of the block universe becomes real? The many-worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, originally proposed by Hugh Everett III, offers one possible answer. According to this interpretation, every quantum measurement doesn't collapse a superposition into a single outcome. Instead, reality branches into multiple parallel universes, each containing a different outcome. In the many-worlds model, when a quantum particle faces a choice between two paths, both paths are taken, but in different branches of reality. The universe literally splits into multiple versions, each containing observers who experience only one outcome. From any observer's perspective, they see a definite result, but all possible results actually occur across the branching structure of parallel realities. If the many-worlds interpretation is correct, then the block universe becomes even more complex. Instead of a single four-dimensional structure containing all moments of one timeline, reality might consist of an infinite branching network of block universes, each containing a different possible history and future. Consider the implications. Every quantum event in the history of the universe, from the fundamental processes that shape the early cosmos to the neural processes in your brain right now, creates branching points where reality splits into multiple versions. This would mean that there are countless versions of you across the quantum multiverse, each experiencing slightly or dramatically different timelines. Some versions of you made different career choices. Some never existed because different quantum events occurred during the formation of Earth or the evolution of life. Some live in universes with different physical laws, where quantum events unfolded differently during the first moments after the Big Bang. The branching structure of quantum reality could contain every possible version of history and every conceivable future. But this raises puzzling questions about consciousness and identity. If there are countless quantum versions of you across the multiverse, which one is the real you? Do you somehow experience all of these parallel timelines, or just one? What determines which branch of quantum reality you find yourself experiencing? Some interpretations suggest that consciousness itself might play a role in selecting which quantum branch gets experienced. Perhaps consciousness doesn't just move through a static block universe, but actually navigates the branching structure of quantum realities, somehow choosing which version of events becomes the experience timeline. Consciousness, in this view, doesn't just move through time, it navigates through the vast landscape of quantum possibilities, experiencing one particular thread of reality among countless alternatives. The timeline you experience is just one path through an infinite maze of quantum possibilities, all of which exist simultaneously in the deeper structure of reality. As we delve deeper into the nature of time and reality, we encounter what philosopher David Chalmers called the hard problem of consciousness. This isn't just about understanding how brains process information or generate behaviors. It's about explaining why there's subjective experience at all. Why is there something it's like to be conscious rather than just complex information processing occurring in biological darkness? This problem becomes even more profound when we consider consciousness in the context of the block universe. If all physical processes, including brain states and neural activity, exist equally throughout the four-dimensional structure of space-time, what is consciousness that allows it to create the experience of moving through time? Traditional neuroscience approaches consciousness as an emergent property of complex neural networks. According to this view, when billions of neurons interact in specific patterns, subjective experience somehow arises from these physical processes. But this approach struggles to explain why there should be any inner experience associated with information processing, no matter how complex. The combination of consciousness with the block universe theory creates additional puzzles. If your brain states at all moments exist simultaneously in space-time, what creates the unified stream of consciousness that connects these moments into a coherent experience of temporal flow? Why doesn't consciousness experience all moments simultaneously or randomly jump between different temporal slices? Some theories propose that consciousness might be a fundamental feature of reality itself, not an emergent property of complex matter. This approach, known as panpsychism, suggests that all matter has some form of proto-conscious properties, and that complex consciousness arises when these simple conscious elements combine in sophisticated ways. If panpsychism is correct, then consciousness isn't produced by brains, it's organized by them. The four-dimensional structure of your brain throughout space-time might serve as a pattern that shapes and integrates more fundamental conscious elements into the unified stream of experience you call your mind. Dr. Giulio Tononi's integrated information theory offers another approach to understanding consciousness in space-time. According to this theory, consciousness corresponds to integrated information, the amount of information generated by a system above and beyond its parts. The more integrated information a system generates, the more conscious it is. From this perspective, consciousness might exist wherever there are patterns of integrated information in the block universe. Your stream of consciousness could be the subjective experience of integrated information patterns unfolding along your world line through space-time. The sense of temporal flow might arise from the way information is integrated across different time slices of your four-dimensional existence. But this raises puzzling questions about the boundaries of consciousness. If consciousness corresponds to integrated information, then there might be forms of consciousness very different from human experience. Large-scale patterns in the block universe, perhaps spanning galactic clusters or extending across cosmic timescales, might generate their own forms of integrated information and conscious experience. Some theories go even further, suggesting that consciousness might be the fundamental reality from which physical processes emerge rather than the reverse. This approach, sometimes called cosmopsychism or consciousness. First theories proposes that what we call the physical universe is actually the external appearance of cosmic consciousness. If consciousness is fundamental, then the block universe might be better understood as a structure within consciousness rather than consciousness being a property of the block universe. The four-dimensional geometry of space-time could be how cosmic consciousness organizes experience, creating the illusion of separate objects moving through space and time. Dr. Federico Fagin, the inventor of the microprocessor, has proposed that consciousness might be the fundamental reality that gives rise to quantum mechanics and space-time itself. In his view, what physicists describe as quantum fields and particles are actually the mathematical description of how consciousness interacts with itself to create the appearance of a material world. These ideas remain highly speculative and are debated within both physics and philosophy, but they illustrate how the combination of modern physics with the mystery of consciousness leads to profound questions about the nature of reality itself. Recent research in neuroscience has revealed intriguing connections between consciousness and time perception. Studies of patients with various forms of brain damage show that consciousness and temporal experience are intimately linked. Damage to certain brain regions can alter not just memory or attention, but the basic sense of temporal flow itself. Some patients lose the ability to form new memories, but retain consciousness of the present moment. Others experience time as fragmented or non-linear. Still others report that their sense of present moment has expanded or contracted dramatically. These conditions suggest that consciousness and temporal experience are constructed by specific neural mechanisms that can be disrupted. But these findings could also be interpreted in terms of the block universe. Perhaps these disrupted states reveal different ways that consciousness can interface with the eternal structure of space-time. Normal temporal consciousness might be just one possible mode of experiencing the four-dimensional reality, while altered states offer glimpses of alternative ways consciousness can navigate the block universe. The relationship between consciousness and quantum mechanics adds another layer to these mysteries. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics, such as the consciousness causes collapse interpretation, suggest that conscious observation plays a role in the collapse of the wave function fundamental role in determining quantum outcomes. If consciousness can influence quantum events, then it might play a role in selecting which branch of quantum reality gets experienced. But this raises the question of whether consciousness transcends the physical structure of space-time. If consciousness can influence quantum events that help determine the structure of reality, then perhaps consciousness operates from a level of reality more fundamental than the space-time block itself. If the block universe is real, if all moments exist simultaneously in the eternal structure of space-time, what happens to human agency and free will? This question strikes at the heart of human identity, moral responsibility, and the meaning of choice itself. In our everyday experience, we feel like agents, beings capable of deliberating between options and selecting our preferred course of action. We experience uncertainty about the future, weigh alternatives, and feel the weight of responsibility for our decisions. This sense of agency seems so fundamental that questioning it challenges our basic understanding of what it means to be human. But if the block universe is correct, then every decision you will ever make already exists eternally in the four-dimensional structure of space-time. The choice you'll make tomorrow about what to have for breakfast isn't open and undetermined. It's already encoded as a fact about your world line through space-time. Your decision to pursue a particular career, to form relationships, to have children or remain childless, all of these supposedly free choices already exist as fixed features of the space-time block. This seems to reduce human agency to mere illusion. If consciousness is simply experiencing predetermined events in sequence, then our sense of choosing appears no more real than the choices made by characters in a movie. The protagonist in a film appears to wrestle with difficult decisions and exercise agency, but these are simply scripted elements of a predetermined narrative. However, the relationship between determinism and free will becomes more complex when we carefully examine what we mean by freedom and choice. Philosophers have long debated whether free will requires the ability to have done otherwise, or whether it's sufficient for choices to flow from our own authentic motivations and rational reflection. Some argue that what matters for free will isn't whether your choices are predetermined, but whether they genuinely arise from your own desires, beliefs, and reasoning processes. A choice can be both eternally encoded in the block universe and genuinely free if it reflects your authentic preferences and thoughtful deliberation. The fact that these preferences and reasoning processes are themselves part of the predetermined structure doesn't necessarily eliminate their role in generating free action. Consider an analogy. When you watch your favorite movie for the 10th time, you still experience emotional engagement with the character's choices, even though you know exactly what will happen. The predetermined nature of the plot doesn't diminish your experience of narrative tension and character agency. The character's choices remain meaningful within the context of the story, even though the story itself is fixed. Similarly, your choices might remain meaningful and free within the context of your world line through the block universe, even though that world line is eternally fixed. The deliberation, weighing of options, and sense of agency you experience are genuine aspects of consciousness, even if they're occurring within a predetermined structure. But this raises deeper questions about personal identity in the block universe. If all moments of your existence are equally real and eternally present, what constitutes the you that makes choices? Are you the four-dimensional object extending through space-time from birth to death? Or are you the consciousness that experiences individual time slices of that four-dimensional being? From one perspective, your entire life exists as a complex pattern in the block universe. What we call personal growth, learning, and character development is actually the structure of this four-dimensional pattern. The you that learns from mistakes isn't changing through time. Rather, the pattern of your world line through space-time is structured such that later temporal slices incorporate information and wisdom from earlier experiences. This view transforms our understanding of moral responsibility. If you commit a harmful act, that act exists eternally in the block universe. But so does any subsequent remorse, learning, and behavioral change. Moral development isn't about transforming from a bad person to a good person through time. It's about the eternal structure of your world line containing both harmful actions and moral growth as parts of a more complex pattern. Some philosophers argue that moral responsibility can survive even in a completely determined universe. What matters isn't whether you could have chosen differently, but whether your actions flow from your own moral character and rational reflection. If you help someone in need, that action remains morally praiseworthy even if it was predetermined, because it still expresses genuine compassion and choice within the structure of your world line. The quantum mechanical interpretation adds another dimension to these questions. If the many worlds interpretation is correct, then there might be countless versions of you across the quantum multiverse, each making different choices in response to different circumstances. While each individual timeline might be predetermined from the block universe perspective, the branching structure of quantum reality could preserve a form of free will at a higher level. Perhaps consciousness navigates not just through time within a single block universe, but across the quantum branches of parallel realities. Your choices might determine which branch of the quantum multiverse you experience, even if each individual branch is predetermined. Free will becomes not the ability to change a fixed future, but the ability to select which predetermined future becomes your experienced reality. Some theories propose that consciousness itself might be what creates the branching structure of quantum reality. rather than quantum events randomly selecting which outcomes occur, conscious choices might influence quantum processes, steering reality toward outcomes that align with deliberate intentions. If consciousness can influence quantum events, then free will might operate through quantum indeterminacy rather than classical causation. But perhaps the most radical possibility is that the entire framework of determinism versus free will is based on false assumptions about the nature of consciousness and choice. If consciousness is fundamental to reality rather than emergent from physical processes, then the question of whether consciousness is free within a predetermined physical universe might miss the deeper point. If consciousness is the ground of reality from which physical processes emerge, then the block universe itself might be better understood as a structure within consciousness rather than consciousness being trapped within a predetermined space-time. From this perspective, the four-dimensional geometry of space-time could be how consciousness organizes experience, rather than a constraint on conscious choice. This possibility suggests that free will and determinism might not be opposites, but different levels of description of the same reality. From the perspective of consciousness as the fundamental reality, choices are free and creative expressions of awareness. From the perspective of the physical description, these choices appear as predetermined patterns in the space-time block. Even if we can't definitively resolve the question of free will in the block universe, the phenomenology of choice remains constant. Consciousness continues to experience deliberation, decision, and agency, regardless of whether these experiences correspond to genuine causal efficacy or are merely replaying predetermined events. The moral and existential significance of conscious experience might not depend on whether consciousness can change the future, but on the authentic engagement with choice and responsibility that consciousness experiences in each moment. The idea that time might be fundamentally different from our everyday experience isn't entirely new to human thought. Throughout history, philosophers, mystics, and spiritual traditions have grappled with similar questions about the nature of time, eternity, and temporal experience. What makes the modern scientific exploration remarkable is how concepts from advanced physics converge with ancient philosophical insights, suggesting that humans have long intuited something profound about the nature of temporal reality. In ancient Greek philosophy, the Stoics developed ideas that bear striking resemblance to certain interpretations of the block universe theory. They believed that all events, past, present, and future, exist within an eternal, unchanging cosmic order, governed by what they called the Logos, a rational principle that structures all of reality. The Stoic philosopher Chrysippus taught that everything that will happen has already been determined by the rational structure of the universe. However, the Stoics didn't see this as eliminating human agency. They distinguished between what individuals could and couldn't control. While the overall structure of events might be eternally fixed, they maintained that human responses to these events remained matters of conscious choice. This parallels modern discussions about free will in the block universe. Even if all events are predetermined, consciousness might still experience authentic choice in how it responds to predetermined circumstances. Hindu philosophy offers even more intriguing parallels. The concept of kala in Sanskrit encompasses not just chronological time but eternal time, a dimension in which all moments exist simultaneously. The Bhagavad Gita contains a remarkable passage where Krishna reveals his cosmic form to Arjuna, showing him all times simultaneously, past, present, and future present, and future existing as one eternal moment. This vision terrifies Arjuna because it reveals that the battle he's about to fight, including the deaths of his relatives, has in some sense already occurred in eternal time. Buddhism's doctrine of dependent origination suggests that all phenomena arise in dependence upon causes and conditions that extend infinitely in all temporal directions. Nothing exists independently or at a single moment in time. Everything is interconnected across what Buddhist texts call beginningless time. This interconnectedness across time resembles aspects of how physicists describe the four-dimensional structure of space-time, where events are connected not just sequentially, but through the eternal geometry of space and time. The mystical traditions of various religions report experiences that seem to transcend ordinary temporal consciousness. Christian mystics like Meister Eckhart wrote about experiencing the eternal now, a state of consciousness in which all time is present simultaneously. Islamic Sufis describe waqt, a spiritual station beyond temporal sequence where past and future collapse into an eternal present moment. These mystical reports often include elements that parallel our scientific discussion. Mystics frequently report that from the eternal perspective, everything that appears to unfold through time has in some sense already occurred. The 13th century mystic Ibn Arabi wrote that creation is not an event that happened in the past, but an eternal relationship that transcends temporal sequence. From this mystical view, the entire history of the cosmos, including its ultimate fate, exists timelessly in divine consciousness. Eastern concepts of cyclical time add another dimension to these parallels. Hindu cosmology describes vast cycles of creation and destruction that repeat across cosmic ages. The current universe will eventually end in dissolution, but this ending has already occurred infinite times before and will occur infinite times again. This suggests that cosmic endings aren't unique events, but eternal patterns in the structure of existence. The philosophical doctrine of eternal recurrence, most famously articulated by Friedrich Nietzsche, proposes that all events repeat infinitely across time. Nietzsche intended this as a thought experiment about how to live authentically, but it bears resemblance to certain interpretations of the block universe. If all moments exist eternally, then in some sense every moment is both unique and infinitely recurring. Contemporary philosophy of mind grapples with tensions between our scientific understanding and subjective experience. Thomas Nagel wrote about the conflict between the view from nowhere, the objective scientific perspective that sees all events as part of a timeless physical structure, and the subjective experience of agency and temporal flow. This tension captures the existential challenge of living as conscious beings who might exist within a block universe. Religious concepts of divine omniscience raise similar questions to those posed by the block universe. If an omniscient being knows all future events, are those events already determined? Various theological traditions have struggled with reconciling divine foreknowledge with human free will. The block universe theory makes these theological questions into scientific ones. If all moments exist eternally in space-time, what happens to human agency and moral responsibility? Some spiritual traditions embrace the idea that temporal experience is a kind of illusion, and that awakening involves recognizing the eternal nature of existence. Advaita Vedanta teaches that ultimate reality, Brahman, is beyond time and change, and that temporal existence is Maya, not exactly an illusion, but a particular way of experiencing something more fundamental. This bears resemblance to the idea that temporal flow might be how consciousness experiences the static structure of the block universe. What's particularly striking is that many wisdom traditions suggest that confronting the illusory nature of temporal experience leads not to despair, but to liberation. If the passage of time is a kind of cosmic dream, then awakening from this dream doesn't eliminate meaning. It reveals a deeper kind of meaning based on eternal rather than temporal values. The convergence of ancient wisdom and modern physics suggests that questions about the nature of time touch something fundamental about human existence. Whether approached through mystical experience, philosophical reflection, or mathematical analysis, human consciousness seems repeatedly drawn to the possibility that what we call time is not the most fundamental structure of reality. However, It's important to distinguish between these philosophical and mystical insights and the specific scientific claims of modern physics. While ancient traditions may have intuited something profound about the nature of time and consciousness, their insights were based on different methods and assumptions than contemporary science. The block universe theory emerges from mathematical physics and experimental evidence, not from mystical experience or philosophical speculation. The convergence is nevertheless remarkable. It suggests that humans have long sensed something mysterious about temporal experience, something that our ordinary understanding of flowing time doesn't fully capture. Whether this convergence reflects deep truths about reality or simply common features of human consciousness remains an open question. As we near the end of our exploration, we must confront a humbling possibility that reality might be so far beyond human intuition that even our most advanced scientific theories only scratch the surface of what's actually going on. Throughout history, every breakthrough in our understanding of the cosmos has revealed that reality is stranger than anyone had imagined. Our ancestors couldn't have conceived of quantum superposition, where particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed. They couldn't have imagined that space and time are relative, flexible dimensions that bend and curve around massive objects. They couldn't have envisioned that empty space itself is expanding, carrying distant galaxies away from us faster than light itself could travel. Each scientific revolution has pushed us further from intuitive understanding toward mathematical abstractions that describe reality more accurately than common sense. Quantum mechanics works perfectly for making predictions about atomic behavior, but nobody claims to have an intuitive understanding of what's really happening when a quantum particle tunnels through a barrier it shouldn't be able to cross. This suggests that the block universe, strange as it seems, might itself be just another stepping stone toward an even more radical understanding of reality. What if our entire framework of thinking about time, space, consciousness, and existence is based on assumptions that will seem quaint to future generations? Consider some possibilities that emerge when we push beyond our current theoretical boundaries. What if consciousness isn't something that moves through the block universe, but something that generates the block universe as a way of organizing experience? What if the four-dimensional structure of space-time is like a software interface, a simplified representation that conscious beings use to navigate something far more complex and multidimensional? Recent developments in theoretical physics point toward possibilities that stretch credibility even further. String theory suggests that what we perceive as four-dimensional space-time might actually be the shadow of a higher dimensional reality with up to 11 dimensions. The holographic principle, supported by research into black hole thermodynamics, proposes that all the information in a volume of space can be encoded on its two-dimensional boundary, suggesting that our three-dimensional experience of space might be a kind of holographic projection. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics, such as the IT from bit hypothesis proposed by John Wheeler, suggest that information rather than matter or energy might be the fundamental constituent of reality. From this perspective, what we call physical objects, forces, and even space-time itself might be information structures within a more fundamental computational reality. If reality is fundamentally informational, then consciousness might not be something that emerges from complex information processing. It might be the subjective experience of information itself. The block universe might be better understood as a data structure within cosmic consciousness, rather than a physical container for conscious beings. These possibilities become even more mind-bending when combined with ideas from digital physics. Some theorists propose that reality might literally be a computational process, not a computer simulation in the sense of artificial intelligence running on some advanced technology, but computation itself as the fundamental nature of existence. If reality is computational, then what we experience as the flow of time might be the execution of a cosmic algorithm. The laws of physics might be the programming rules that govern how information is processed and transformed. Consciousness might be what it feels like to be a particular pattern of information processing within this cosmic computation. The simulation hypothesis, popularized by philosopher Nick Bostrom, takes these ideas in a different direction. If it becomes possible for advanced civilizations to run detailed simulations of their ancestors, and if they choose to do so, then most conscious beings might actually exist within simulated realities rather than base physical reality. From inside a simulation, there might be no way to distinguish between simulated and real experience. But even the simulation hypothesis might not be radical enough. What if the distinction between simulated and real doesn't make sense at the most fundamental level? What if consciousness is the ground of reality, and what we call physical and simulated realities are just different ways that consciousness organizes experience? Some theories in consciousness research suggest that subjective experience might be far more fundamental than we typically assume. The hard problem of consciousness, explaining why there's something it's like to have experiences rather than just information processing occurring in darkness, might indicate that consciousness is not produced by physical processes, but is instead the context within which physical processes appear. If consciousness is fundamental, then the entire framework of asking whether consciousness is in the block universe or moving through it might be backwards. Instead, the block universe might be a structure within consciousness, a way that awareness organizes experience of space, time, and causality. This perspective suggests that what we call the physical universe might be more like a dream within cosmic consciousness than a mechanical system containing conscious observers. The laws of physics might be the logical structure of this dream, while individual conscious beings might be focal points of attention within the broader cosmic awareness. From this view, questions about whether time has ended or is flowing become questions about how consciousness chooses to experience its own creative activity. The block universe might exist eternally, but so might countless other ways of organizing experience that we can't currently imagine. Recent research in neuroscience and psychology reveals how constructed and malleable our experience of reality actually is. Our brains don't passively receive sensory data. They actively construct our experience of the world by filling in gaps, making predictions, and creating coherent narratives from fragmentary information. What we experience as stable, objective reality is actually an elaborate construction project carried out by neural networks that evolved for survival rather than accurate perception. This constructive nature of experience suggests that our intuitions about time, space, and causality might be more like artistic interpretations than scientific measurements. We experience temporal flow not because time actually flows, but because that's how our particular type of information processing system interprets its interaction with a more complex underlying reality. If our basic categories of understanding, time, space, matter, mind, are constructions rather than fundamental features of reality, then we might be living in something like Immanuel Kant's phenomenal world, where we only ever experience reality as it appears to our particular cognitive apparatus rather than as it actually is in itself. But unlike Kant, who thought we could never know the thing in itself, modern physics might be giving us mathematical glimpses of reality beyond human categories. The equations of quantum mechanics and relativity might be like translation devices, allowing us to work with aspects of reality that we can't directly experience or intuitively understand. What emerges from this perspective is both humbling and awe-inspiring. We might be conscious beings embedded in a reality so vast, strange, and beautiful that our current understanding captures only the faintest echo of its true nature. The block universe, with all its implications for time and consciousness, might itself be just a limited human perspective on something ineffably more complex. Yet consciousness remains. Whatever reality ultimately is, you are experiencing something right now. There is something it's like to be aware, to have thoughts and sensations, to contemplate these questions about the nature of existence. This fact of conscious experience might be the one thing we can be certain about, even if everything else about reality remains mysterious. Whether consciousness moves through a block universe, generates reality through observation, exists as information processing in a cosmic computer, or represents the fundamental ground from which everything else emerges, the mystery of awareness itself persists. You are, in this moment, the universe becoming conscious of itself, reality experiencing its own existence through the unique perspective of your individual awareness. If we take seriously the possibility that time doesn't flow, that all moments exist simultaneously in an eternal block universe, we face a profound paradox. How do we live meaningful lives within what might be a timeless reality? This question strikes at the heart of human existence and forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about purpose, progress, and what it means to be alive. The paradox runs deep. On one hand, if the block universe is real, then every moment of your life, every choice you make, every relationship you form, every achievement you accomplish, already exists eternally in the four-dimensional structure of space-time. Your entire biography, from birth to death, is already written in the geometry of the cosmos. From this perspective, nothing you do can change anything, because everything that will happen has already happened in the timeless structure of reality. On the other hand, you undeniably experience making choices, forming plans, working toward goals, and creating change in your environment. You experience the uncertainty of the future, the weight of moral decisions, and the satisfaction of accomplishment. These experiences feel absolutely real and significant, regardless of whether they're occurring within a flowing timeline or replaying predetermined events in an eternal structure. This creates what we might call the existential paradox of eternalism. If your life is already complete in the block universe, why does it feel so urgently incomplete in your daily experience? If your future is as fixed as your past, why do you experience the future as open and undetermined? If time doesn't flow, why does conscious experience create such a convincing illusion of temporal passage? One way to approach this paradox is through what philosophers call the indexical nature of conscious experience. Even if all moments exist equally in the block universe, consciousness can only be located at specific space-time coordinates at any given instant. From your current temporal location in the block, future events are genuinely unknown to you, even though they exist as definitely as past events. Consider an analogy with spatial location. All geographical locations on Earth exist simultaneously, but your experience of geography is fundamentally shaped by where you happen to be standing. From your current position, distant places are hidden beyond the horizon, while nearby locations are immediately accessible. Your spatial perspective doesn't mean that distant places don't exist. It just means that your access to them is limited by your current position. Similarly, your temporal perspective might be fundamentally shaped by your current position in the block universe. Future events might exist as definitely as distant geographical locations, but your consciousness can only access information from your current temporal coordinates and those in your causal past. This creates genuine uncertainty about the future, even in a deterministic block universe. But the paradox goes deeper than just uncertainty about the future. It touches on questions of agency, responsibility, and meaning. If your choices are already made in the eternal structure of reality, can you take credit or blame for their outcomes? If your personal growth is already encoded in the four-dimensional pattern of your world line, does effort and striving make any difference? Some philosophers argue that meaning and responsibility can survive eternalism. What matters isn't whether you could have chosen differently, but whether your choices express your authentic values and emerge from genuine deliberation. The fact that your values and deliberation are themselves part of the predetermined structure doesn't eliminate their role in generating meaningful action. Your choice to help someone in need remains morally praiseworthy even if it was predetermined, because it still expresses genuine compassion flowing through your particular pattern in the block universe. Your decision to learn something new remains personally meaningful even if it was always encoded in your world line, because it still represents consciousness encountering and integrating new information. This perspective suggests that meaning doesn't depend on the ability to change a genuinely open future, but on the authentic expression of consciousness through the pattern of events that constitute your life. Whether that pattern is unfolding through flowing time or exists eternally in space-time might be less important than the fact that consciousness experiences it as meaningful. The block universe might also transform rather than eliminate our understanding of progress and growth. Instead of thinking of personal development as changing from one state to another through time, we might think of it as the four-dimensional structure of a life that contains both earlier and later stages. The you that overcomes challenges isn't different from the you that faces them. They're different temporal slices of the same four-dimensional person. This view could actually enhance our appreciation for life's difficult moments. If consciousness is experiencing a predetermined story, then every struggle, every moment of pain or confusion serves a purpose in the larger pattern. The difficulties you face aren't obstacles to overcome so much as necessary elements in the complete structure of your existence. Some find this perspective comforting. If your life story is already complete in the block universe, then every problem you'll face has already been resolved. Every period of suffering has already come to an end. Every moment of joy has already been experienced. There's a sense in which everything is already okay, because the complete story exists eternally. Others find this deeply disturbing, as it seems to eliminate the urgency and importance of current struggles. If your future is already fixed, why work to improve yourself or help others? Why strive for anything if the outcomes are predetermined? But this objection might be based on a misunderstanding of what predetermined means in the block universe. Your future isn't predetermined by some external force that overrides your choices. It's predetermined partly by the choices you will authentically make. Your efforts to improve yourself or help others are part of what determines the structure of your world line through space-time. The predetermined nature of the block universe doesn't mean your choices don't matter. It means they matter so much that they're eternally inscribed in the structure of reality itself. Every act of kindness, every moment of courage, every effort to understand or create or love becomes a permanent feature of the cosmic architecture. This might actually increase, rather than decrease, the significance of conscious choices. In a flowing time universe, your actions have consequences that eventually fade into the past. In the block universe, your actions are eternal features of reality that exist just as definitely as the mathematical constants that govern physical processes. Living with this perspective requires a fundamental shift in how we think about time and purpose. Instead of seeing life as a process of moving from an incomplete present toward a more complete future, we might see it as consciousness experiencing and expressing the eternal completeness that already exists. This doesn't necessarily lead to fatalism or passivity. Even if the outcomes of your efforts are already encoded in the block universe, consciousness still experiences the process of effort, struggle, discovery, and achievement. The journey remains meaningful even if the destination is already fixed. In fact, knowing that your life exists eternally in the block universe might inspire rather than discourage conscious engagement with experience. Every moment becomes infinitely precious because it exists forever. Every choice becomes infinitely significant because it's permanently inscribed in the structure of space-time. The paradox of living in a timeless reality might ultimately be resolved not through philosophical argument, but through a transformation in consciousness itself. As our understanding of time and reality evolves, our experience of existence might evolve as well. We might learn to live with a kind of eternal perspective that embraces both the timeless nature of the block universe and the temporal nature of conscious experience. This could represent a new stage in human consciousness, the ability to experience both time and eternity simultaneously, to feel both the urgency of temporal existence and the peace of eternal being. Such consciousness would be neither trapped in time nor detached from it, but would participate fully in both temporal experience and eternal reality. Whether such a transformation in consciousness is possible remains to be seen, but the very fact that we can contemplate these questions, that consciousness can reflect on its own nature and place in the cosmos, suggests that awareness itself might be more flexible and creative than we typically assume. As our exploration nears its end, we must consider where our understanding of time, consciousness, and reality might be heading. Science continues to push the boundaries of what we thought was possible, while philosophy grapples with the implications of our evolving understanding of existence itself. The questions we've explored tonight may seem abstract, but they're driving cutting-edge research that could fundamentally change how humanity understands its place in the cosmos. In experimental physics, researchers are designing increasingly sophisticated tests of our assumptions about time and causality. Quantum mechanics laboratories around the world are exploring phenomena like quantum retrocausality, where future events appear to influence past conditions. These experiments challenge our basic understanding of temporal sequence and suggest that the relationship between past, present, and future might be far more complex than we imagined. The study of quantum entanglement continues to reveal non-local connections that seem to transcend spatial and temporal boundaries. When entangled particles maintain instantaneous correlations across vast distances, they suggest that the separations we experience in space and time might not reflect the deepest level of reality. Some theorists propose that quantum entanglement reveals a more fundamental level of existence, where spatial and temporal distinctions break down entirely. Gravitational wave astronomy, opened by the detection of colliding black holes, is providing new ways to test Einstein's predictions about the nature of space-time. As we develop more sensitive detectors and observe more exotic events, perhaps including the theoretical possibility of closed time-like curves around rotating black holes, we might discover phenomena that challenge our understanding of temporal structure. Research into consciousness is advancing on multiple fronts. Neuroscientists are developing increasingly detailed maps of how the brain constructs temporal experience, while philosophers of mind are exploring how subjective experience relates to objective physical processes. The integration of neuroscience with quantum physics is raising questions about whether consciousness might operate through quantum processes that transcend classical spacetime. Some researchers are investigating whether consciousness itself might have quantum properties that allow it to exist in superposition states or maintain non-local correlations. If consciousness operates partially outside classical spacetime, this could explain how subjective experience creates the impression of temporal flow within the static structure of the block universe. Artificial intelligence research is approaching questions about consciousness and temporal experience from a different angle. As AI systems become more sophisticated, researchers are exploring whether artificial consciousness might experience time differently than biological consciousness. Machine consciousness could potentially process multiple temporal sequences simultaneously or experience time at dramatically different rates than human consciousness. The development of artificial consciousness might also provide new perspectives on the relationship between information processing and subjective experience. If we can create conscious AI systems, we might better understand how consciousness relates to the information structures of the block universe. Cosmology continues to refine our understanding of the universe's ultimate fate. New observations of dark energy and cosmic expansion will help determine whether our universe faces heat death, cyclic collapse and rebirth, or some other cosmic destiny. If the universe is cyclic, the block universe might extend infinitely in both temporal directions rather than having definite beginning and end points. String theory and other approaches to quantum gravity are exploring how space-time itself might emerge from more fundamental structures. If space and time are emergent rather than fundamental, this could radically change our understanding of what the block universe represents. Perhaps the four-dimensional structure we observe is a simplified representation of a much more complex underlying reality. The study of black hole information paradoxes is pushing physicists toward new understanding of how information is preserved in the universe. The resolution of these paradoxes might reveal that information, and perhaps consciousness, has a more fundamental role in the structure of reality than we currently understand. Some theorists are exploring whether the universe might be fundamentally computational, with physical processes representing information processing operations. If reality is computational, consciousness might be what it feels like to be certain types of computation running on the cosmic computer. Philosophy of mind continues to grapple with the hard problem of consciousness and its relationship to physical reality. New theories are emerging that place consciousness in increasingly fundamental roles in the structure of existence. Panpsychist theories suggest consciousness might be a basic feature of reality, while cosmopsychist theories propose that individual consciousness might be aspects of cosmic consciousness. The integration of Eastern philosophical traditions with Western science is opening new avenues for understanding consciousness and time. Contemplative neuroscience is studying how meditation and other consciousness practices might reveal different ways of experiencing temporal reality. Some meditators report states of consciousness where the normal flow of time is suspended or dramatically altered. These contemplative traditions might offer practical methods for exploring how consciousness relates to the block universe. If it's possible to experientially access different modes of temporal consciousness, this could provide empirical data about the nature of time and awareness that complements theoretical physics. The development of brain-computer interfaces might eventually allow direct exploration of different modes of temporal consciousness. If we can modify how the brain processes temporal information, we might discover that our normal experience of flowing time is just one possible mode of consciousness among many others. Virtual and augmented reality technologies are already beginning to alter human temporal experience. As these technologies become more sophisticated, they might allow exploration of radically different ways of experiencing time and causality. We might develop the ability to experience multiple temporal sequences simultaneously, or to navigate non-linear temporal structures. The implications of these developments extend far beyond academic research. If our understanding of time and consciousness continues to evolve, it could transform how humanity approaches questions of meaning, mortality, and cosmic purpose. A species that understands its place in the block universe might develop radically different approaches to ethics, spirituality, and social organization. Education systems might need to prepare people for a world where the nature of time itself is understood differently than it has been throughout human history. How do you teach children to live meaningfully in a potentially timeless reality? How do you maintain motivation and purpose if the future is already fixed in the structure of space-time? These questions become particularly relevant as human technology approaches the ability to manipulate space and time directly. If we develop the ability to travel through time or create closed time-like curves, humanity will need practical wisdom for navigating a reality where past, present, and future interact in complex ways. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence might also provide new perspectives on consciousness and time. If we encounter alien civilizations that have evolved different relationships to temporal experience, we might discover that our human approach to time is just one possibility among many. Advanced alien civilizations might have learned to experience the block universe directly rather than creating illusions of temporal flow. Ultimately, the future of our understanding of time and consciousness remains radically open. Science continues to reveal that reality is stranger than anyone imagined, and there's no reason to expect this process to stop. The block universe theory itself might eventually seem quaint compared to whatever deeper understanding emerges from future research. What seems certain is that consciousness will continue to be central to these investigations. Whether consciousness proves to be emergent from physical processes, fundamental to reality itself, or something entirely beyond our current categories of understanding, it remains the one aspect of existence that we know most directly and intimately. As we develop new theories and technologies for exploring the nature of reality, consciousness will be both the investigator and the investigated, the observer and the observed. The questions we've explored tonight about the nature of time, the reality of the block universe, and the relationship between consciousness and physical reality are ultimately questions that consciousness is asking about itself. The answers we find may transform not just our scientific understanding, but our lived experience of existence. We might be approaching a time when humanity develops new forms of consciousness that can directly experience the eternal nature of reality while still engaging meaningfully with temporal existence. Whether that transformation leads to greater wisdom, deeper peace, or more profound engagement with the mystery of existence remains to be seen. But the journey of discovery itself, consciousness exploring its own nature and place in the cosmos, continues to unfold with each moment of awareness, each question asked, each possibility contemplated. As our journey through the deepest questions of time and consciousness draws to a close, we find ourselves confronting an extraordinary possibility that everything we thought we knew about the nature of existence might need fundamental revision. We've explored how modern physics suggests that time might not flow as we experience it, how consciousness might relate to an eternal block universe, and how these ideas connect with ancient philosophical traditions. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this exploration is not any particular conclusion we might reach, but the fact that consciousness can contemplate these questions at all. Whether time flows or exists eternally, whether we live in a deterministic block universe or navigate quantum branches of parallel realities, whether consciousness is emergent from matter or fundamental to existence itself, the mystery of awareness examining its own nature remains profound. The scientific evidence we've examined throughout this exploration points toward conclusions that challenge our most basic assumptions about reality. Einstein's relativity theory, supported by countless experiments, demonstrates that simultaneity is relative and that space-time forms a unified four-dimensional structure. The second law of thermodynamics points toward an ultimate cosmic fate in heat death. Quantum mechanics reveals behavior that seems to transcend our ordinary understanding of locality and causality. Yet we must be careful to distinguish between established scientific results and speculative interpretations. While the mathematical formalism of relativity is well established, the block universe interpretation remains a philosophical position rather than an empirically verified fact. While quantum mechanics makes incredibly precise predictions, the meaning of quantum phenomena remains hotly debated among physicists and philosophers. The eternalist interpretation of space-time, the idea that all moments exist simultaneously in a block universe, emerges naturally from Einstein's equations and is consistent with experimental evidence. But other interpretations of the same mathematical framework remain possible. Some physicists argue for presentist interpretations, where only the present moment is real, while others explore growing block theories, where the past and present are real, but the future remains genuinely open. Similarly, while the hard problem of consciousness, explaining why there's subjective experience at all, points toward deep mysteries about the nature of mind and reality, the specific relationship between consciousness and space-time remains largely speculative. Theories that place consciousness in fundamental roles in reality, such as panpsychism or cosmopsychism, are philosophically interesting but lack strong empirical support. What we can say with confidence is that our everyday experience of flowing time, while compelling and practically useful, may not reflect the deepest structure of reality. Just as our intuitive sense that the Earth is flat and stationary was overturned by astronomy, our intuitive sense that time flows from past to future may be overturned by physics. This doesn't necessarily mean that temporal flow is purely illusory. It might mean that temporal flow is a real aspect of consciousness that emerges from or interacts with the more fundamental structure of space-time in ways we don't yet understand. Consciousness might be what creates the experience of temporal passage within the static geometry of the block universe. If this interpretation is correct, then consciousness holds a unique and perhaps fundamental position in the cosmos. While everything else might exist as eternal structure within space-time, consciousness might be what brings this structure to life through subjective experience. You are not just matter arranged in complex patterns. You are the awareness through which the universe experiences itself. This perspective transforms questions about meaning and purpose in a potentially timeless reality. Whether your life unfolds through flowing time or exists eternally in space-time, consciousness continues to experience beauty, love, discovery, and growth. The significance of conscious experience doesn't depend on whether it occurs within temporal flow or eternal structure. If anything, the possibility that consciousness transcends ordinary temporal limitations might enhance rather than diminish the meaning of existence. Every moment of awareness becomes infinitely precious if it exists eternally in the structure of reality. Every choice becomes infinitely significant if it's permanently inscribed in the cosmic architecture. The convergence of modern physics with ancient philosophical traditions suggests that questions about the nature of time touch something fundamental about human existence. Whether approached through mathematical analysis or contemplative practice, consciousness seems repeatedly drawn to the possibility that ordinary temporal experience points towards something more vast and eternal. But we must remain humble about the limitations of current understanding. The deepest questions about consciousness, time, and reality remain open. We don't know whether consciousness is produced by physical processes, emerges from information processing, or represents something more fundamental than physical reality itself. We don't know whether the block universe is the final word on the nature of space-time or just another stepping stone toward deeper understanding. What we do know is that consciousness continues to be the great mystery at the heart of existence. Whatever reality ultimately turns out to be, you are experiencing something right now. There is something it's like to be aware, to contemplate these questions, to wonder about the nature of existence itself. This fact of conscious experience might be the one certainty in a cosmos full of uncertainty. Whether consciousness moves through time, generates reality through observation, exists as patterns in a cosmic computation, or represents the fundamental ground from which everything else emerges. The mystery of awareness persists. The questions we've explored tonight may never be definitively answered. The nature of time, consciousness, and reality might remain forever at the limits of human understanding. But the exploration itself, Consciousness, investigating its own nature and place in the cosmos, continues to reveal new depths of mystery and wonder. Perhaps this is as it should be. Perhaps the universe is structured not to provide final answers, but to support endless exploration, infinite depths of questions within questions, consciousness eternally discovering new aspects of its own mysterious nature. Whether time flows or exists eternally, whether we inhabit a deterministic block universe or navigate infinite quantum possibilities, whether consciousness is fundamental or emergent, you are here now, aware and questioning, participating in the cosmos's attempt to understand itself. This moment of awareness, whatever its ultimate nature, represents something extraordinary. In a universe that might consist of unconscious matter moving according to mathematical laws, consciousness somehow arises and contemplates its own existence. In a cosmos that might be nothing more than information processing, subjective experience emerges and wonders about its own reality. The fact that you can contemplate whether time flows or stands still, whether consciousness is fundamental or emergent, whether your existence is temporal or eternal, this capacity for self-reflection might be the most remarkable feature of reality. Consciousness, examining consciousness, awareness, investigating awareness, the universe contemplating itself through the vehicle of questions like the ones we've explored tonight. As we conclude this journey through some of the deepest questions ever contemplated by human minds, we're left not with definitive answers, but with a profound appreciation for the mystery of existence itself. Whether we've been moving through time toward these insights or experiencing eternal moments of understanding, consciousness continues to be the light that illuminates the deepest questions about reality. The eternal mystery of now, the fact that there is something rather than nothing, something it's like to be aware rather than mere mechanical process, something experiencing these words right now rather than just information being processed, persists regardless of how we ultimately understand the nature of time and space. You are that mystery, experiencing itself in this moment, contemplating its own nature through questions that stretch to the very foundations of existence. Whether this moment is flowing through time or exists eternally in space-time, whether consciousness is fundamental or emergent, whether reality is physical or informational, the mystery of awareness remains. And in that mystery lies perhaps the deepest truth we can discover, that consciousness, whatever its ultimate nature, continues to be the most profound aspect of existence, the light in which all questions appear, the awareness through which the cosmos investigates its own reality. The exploration continues with each moment of consciousness, each question asked, each wonder felt about the extraordinary fact of existence itself. Whether time has ended or flows eternally, the mystery of now remains as vast and wonderful as the cosmos that contains it. This has been our exploration of what might be the deepest questions about the nature of reality, questions that consciousness asks about itself, mysteries that awareness contemplates within its own infinite depths. The journey of understanding continues moment by eternal moment in the endless mystery of what it means to be conscious in this strange and wonderful universe.